Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I am finishing catching up on my summer reads with weeks 28, 29, and 30 of my 2023 reads. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. First, I finished Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. Fern Brady is a Scottish comedian that Sush and I really enjoyed seeing in Taskmaster, which is a very fun British show. And after we watched that, I heard that she was coming out with a memoir. And so I was very interested in picking it up. So I listened to this on audio and I had a really good time with this. So what this is really about is about Fern Brady's life, which was actually rather difficult. So there are quite a few content warnings, and I have those down below in the description box if you want to see. And her as an adult getting diagnosed with autism and suddenly kind of making sense and understanding what a difficult time she had growing up. I think that if you liked 10 Steps to Nanette, you definitely should consider giving this one a try. Fern Brady has a different personality and a different life experience, but there's a lot of similarities since both of them are queer comedians who discovered later in life that they were autistic. And it's really interesting seeing kind of what Fern Brady went through and also being able to compare that a little bit to what Hannah Gadsby went through. So yeah, I think that the humor in this really helps leaven a lot of the very heavy content. Fern Brady really went through quite a lot, and she does a very, very good job about kind of really advocating and teaching about autism and understanding especially how that presents in a lot of women and how that relates to a lot of things that maybe people don't expect. Just stuff like, for example, how hard it was for her to have a job in something like an office with the fluorescent lights and the constant, kind of little noises around and all of these sorts of experiences. But how when she got a job stripping, that was actually much easier because there's a lot of routine, there's low lighting, you don't have to mask as much. So all of these really interesting things about her life. But again, a lot of stuff happened and there is quite a lot of drama in this. I think that she's still kind of pretty angry. She has a very angry personality, which I generally like, but there's just a lot of high emotion in this about many of the interactions that she had and the experiences. So that was just a little bit much at times for me, but overall, I really enjoyed this and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Not Another Family Wedding by Jackie Lau. This is a contemporary romance about a woman whose younger sister is getting married, and she is a little not looking forward to going to the wedding because every time there's a wedding in her family, something atrocious happens at the wedding, just really embarrassing and awkward and awful moments. And so she convinces an old friend of hers to go with her as like moral support. But of course, once they're there, things start developing and maybe friends turn into lovers. So this has a lot of kind of Jackie Lau's very signature things where there's a lot about family dynamics, there's a lot about personal issues. One of the main things about this is that the main character is, I think 36, and she does not want to have kids, and that has proven kind of difficult in terms of dating because a lot of the guys that she dates just want kids, and so it just rules out relationships. And also her family, she feels some pressure there. And so there's quite a lot about that and about the child-free lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. Cynthia at Book Whimsy, who I will link below, read this recently and mentioned that she thought that that was a little overdone. Like it was very heavy-handed in the way it was addressed, and I think that that is true. I found that this story focused so heavily on the main character and her kind of issues surrounding the way that she perceives other people perceiving her as a child-free person, that dominates it a bit more than the romance. So the romance just didn't feel as strong, and there was quite a bit of family drama as well. So it was a good story, but it really didn't have the playfulness and the joy and the sweetness of a lot of other Jackie Lau stories for me. So I thought it was okay, but not one of my favorites. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then, since the Hugo shortlist was announced, I ended up picking up quite a few different novellas that were on the shortlist that I hadn't yet read, starting with What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. So Kingfisher, I have really enjoyed some of her works, and some of them have been a little bit more meh for me, especially her horror novels, because I have loved the atmosphere. I love the way that she does horror atmosphere, but I've struggled in some of her previous horror works with the way that the characters keep making really bad decisions. It just frustrates me to no end. So since this was a horror novella, I was a little not sure if it was going to work out for me, but I really enjoyed this one. So this is basically a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher, and it follows a soldier who goes to visit some old friends, but their house seems really messed up and weird stuff is going on with them, and they're sick, and it's just unclear what's going on, but something is very wrong. And so the creepy atmosphere in this is so strong. There's a lot of really interesting interactions. It just has that dread of gothic horror, which I super enjoyed. It's interesting because in the end, in the afterword, Kingfisher talks a little bit about reading the Fall of the House of Usher and how she was like, yeah, but nothing was explained. And so in this book, there is an explanation. You get to find out kind of in this version what happens and what caused all of that. But I found that that was actually less compelling for me. I loved all of the creepy aspects, but when we got to the end and there was action and explanations, I was like less invested. So I think I just like that creepy gothic atmosphere. But even so, I thought that this was such a fun read and really engaging. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I have really enjoyed the things of Tchaikovsky's that I've read before, such as Children of Time. I think he has really engaging writing and really interesting ideas, so I was very much looking forward to this novella, but unfortunately it didn't quite work out as well for me as I was hoping. So this story is basically set in a world where there's a lot of inequity. So there are humans who are basically these peasants that are very much downtrodden, and there are these people called the Ogres, and the Ogres are 10 feet tall. They're very, very, very strong, but very brutish. They have a lot of violence and a lot of passions, and they really abuse the humans and take advantage of them. And there's huge, almost like a feudal style system of inequities. And so we follow a human man, a young man, who ends up leading a rebellion against the Ogres. And so it's about his journey, his hero's journey from when he first starts to kind of fight against the system until he leads this big rebellion. And there's some interesting things that are being done in the story at the very end that kind of frame the rest of the story in an interesting way. But I did not find that the experience of getting to the end was very pleasant. So I was just kind of disinvested in this story almost the entire way. And I found that it was just very hard to care about what was happening. I was just kind of annoyed for the whole reading experience. Even though I do think that the ending is doing something interesting, it wasn't enough to make the reading experience very pleasant for me. So this just didn't work out so well for me, even though I can understand why a lot of people love what was being done in the way that that story was being unfolded. It just wasn't for me. So I was still okay with it, but it wasn't as strong as so many of the other Tchaikovsky things that I had read. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk, which is the last of the novellas that I had to read for the Hugos this year. And this one I was a little bit not sure if I would like or not, because I had read The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk, and that one was just okay for me. It was fine, but it didn't really grip me as deeply as I had wanted to. But this one did. I quite enjoyed it. I was really pleasantly surprised by how much fun I had reading this. So this is set in sort of a, I don't know, a Prohibition era style of kind of noir detective feel story, but with angels and demons and magic. And we follow a woman who is a detective, and she has sold her soul to a demon basically almost 10 years prior, and that kind of soul is going to become due in a few days. But she's doing one last case, and she's trying to earn a little bit of money to set aside for her girlfriend, so that, her love will have something to kind of survive on when she's gone. And it's got this like really sweet sapphic romance. It's got a lot of that kind of detective noir feel without some of the aspects that I really dislike about noir detectives. So it doesn't have like the misogyny and everything like that. But it's got really great atmosphere. I thought that the magic with the demons and the angels was really cool, and just also a lot of discussion about kind of what it was like to be a queer woman in that early part of the 20th century. So I was really engaged throughout the story. I thought this was really good. The ending did get a bit action forward and violent for my taste, but other than that, I had such a good time with this. So I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read a cookbook, which I quite enjoyed, which was Eat More Plants by Desiree Nielsen. So this is a cookbook by a nutritionist, and the first, I would say maybe third of the book is quite a bit of information about nutrition. And so this book is about vegan and gluten-free diet. And so there's quite a bit in there about, you know, balancing a lot of your needs for protein and other things like that. I am not vegan or gluten-free, by the way, but Sush, my husband, is a vegetarian. And so we do a lot of vegetarian cooking. And I find that often when people make vegetarian recipes who aren't from maybe like a culture that has a history of vegetarianism, it's more like they remove meat rather than they make a full complete meal. And so I really loved the way that this book very much focused on making sure you're getting enough protein, because that's actually quite hard on even a vegetarian diet, but especially a vegan diet. And so I loved the focus on especially a lot of things like lentils and beans and nuts and seeds and stuff like that. That's really excellent. And also I thought that the gluten-free aspect was a little challenging at times because of all of the things where anything kind of involving baking, all of the things where there's like substitutes, and I'm not so used to that. But there was a lot of use of stuff like chickpea flour, which I quite enjoy. Like I've made other dishes with chickpea flour, so I'm very intrigued by many of the recipes in this. So that first section, just talking about nutrition, I thought was really interesting. And then the recipes, there were so many different recipes in this that sounded so intriguing to me, things I wanted to try. And I tried making a couple of the recipes the other day, and they turned out really good. They were very tasty. That's the other thing, is that sometimes I find vegan cooking can be a little bit bland, but these had a lot of flavor, really, you know, lots of umami and depth and everything like that. So that was awesome. The only thing about this book is that I did find there's like a weird amount of inclusion of sweetness in all kinds of recipes, like all kinds of things that are savory recipes that have some dates or some maple syrup added. I'm like, why is there so much sweetness that is added in all of these recipes? And also just that substitution thing. I wasn't always clear, you know, do I have to use this? Could I use eggs or something else, you know? So I'm just not familiar enough with vegan cooking to know what I can substitute back out. So yeah, but anyway, I thought that this was a really good cookbook. So if you're at all interested in looking at vegan and gluten-free cooking, and especially if you want to make sure you're still getting enough kind of balanced of protein and whatever other nutrients you need, I think this is a good book to pick up. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And then lastly, Sish and I re-listened to one of our favorite books on audio, which is Text from Jane Eyre by Daniel M. Lavery, narrated by Amy Landon and Zach Villa. This is a book that we, for the past, 4 or 5 years, have re-listened to each year, except that this year we have been just craving listening to it. So we actually re-listened to it at the beginning of the year, and then we re-listened to it this summer, and we'll probably re-listen to it again in the fall. We love this book so much. And this is just such a fun short book. This is about a 2-hour audiobook. And it is just a bunch of little bitty satires of various works of literature and authors throughout history, starting with some of the old Greek epics, and then moving up into things like Babysitter's Club. I mean, it covers the range, and it is just so ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. The narrators are extra over the top ridiculous. I cannot get enough of it. We especially love the Edgar Allan Poe one and the Wuthering Heights one, and there's just so many in this that we find ourselves throughout the year just quoting because we find it so funny. And every time I've re-listened to this, I have found it more funny, and I have found more things that intrigue me. We've read a lot of the books after our first listen to this, and then you understand what the references are to. So yeah, I can't even explain how much joy this brings me. I think that there are definitely still some of the satires that we don't quite get or aren't quite as funny to us, but I love this book. I love listening to it. I love the narrators, and it's just so much fun. So I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and don't be surprised if you see another re-listen to this later this year. Okay, so that catches up everything that I read over this summer. If you guys have read any of these books, if you have any thoughts, if you've read anything interesting this summer, I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.